have an unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J.N. Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I hope everyone's had a good time and is ready for Halloween. This is the last show before Halloween, before we begin a new month, November. As always, we have a fascinating show for you today. If you've been paying attention to social media, you know exactly who is on. Someone who I truly look forward to speaking, and someone who is a hero with regards to, with so many aspects, but with regards to journalism and his journalistic ways that he goes. Definitely someone that sets the standard for everyone to follow if you are to go down the path of journalism. First, let's share some news with you. Now, the first thing, this is actually what came to me fairly late. I can't give you the name. Remember, I told you about my family member who works for what was formerly Blackwater USA, a very similar company. It's a private military contractor, and he's living in Kuwait. And he was a hardcore skeptic all through the times of beginning my show years ago. And when he came back and visited this past April, he told me he finally believes. And I said, what was it that made you finally believe we're not alone? He said, because us having such high technology, we know where all our drones are. We know where all the Russian drones are, the Indian drones are, everything, because we have the best technology and we sell it to them. However, his roommate, who happens to be a retired U.S. Army general, his sole job, making $200,000 a year, is to use the most high-tech equipment searching for extraterrestrial craft to check their size, the patterns, the shapes, the routes they're taking, everything. And he's telling me crazy stories, like they'll be looking in one area and something will come by the other area, so they'll go focus their equipment to that area where what object just passed, and sure enough, it'll go through the area that they were just looking at, almost as if these beings are doing this on purpose. So very interesting. But what he just gave me to share with everybody is he said, look up Mount Weather. Now, I don't know if this is old for you guys. It's definitely new for me. Mount Weather, he claims, is another underground base, or DUMB, as they call it, D-U-M-B, deep underground military bunker. I would love to know if it's something along the lines of Dulce. And again, remember, us as radio hosts and the speakers and lecturers and researchers and journalists who come on this show, even the politicians and celebrities, all they can do is provide you with the information. It is up to you out there, each and every one of you, to take the information and do some research on it, validate UFO videos, spread the news. Remember, it takes everyone to make disclosure happen. Disclosure is in your hands. Here's a few other things. Now, this is cool because this actually is on video. But again, as our good friend who's joining us very shortly, who's actually on, but I'm letting you guys ponder and look at the social media to see who it is, pointed out that, and I've been saying this for a long time, any 10-year-old with a PC, what's funny? I was reading some equipment about 15 years ago, and it required to use a USB drive. And in the instructions for the MP3 player, long before the iPod, what they said was, if you don't know where your USB port, ask your 5-year-old. Okay, so the point is any 10-year-old out there with half of a brain and a good PC, or even an old PC, can use Photoshop and create these videos that go viral, but are nothing but BS. So it is up to you out there to do some research. Thankfully, that's why we have Jaime Maussan. Every time I find something super good, I send it to him, and he sends it to not one, but 2 international laboratories to confirm what the video was actually, the craft or object was actually in the video, not photoshopped or overlaid or whatever you want to call it, double exposed. And then the next step of the investigation occurs. Talk to the witnesses, and let's see if this was a drone, a bird, or something else. Okay, metal butterfly spaceship is clearest video among clearest videos ever, and this happened to appear on the Yahoo News. And this was not the only place I found this, so I would love for all of you to check it out. Go to my website, use the contact button on drjradiolive.com, and share your thoughts. Just like when we were talking about the Arecibo message that we had sent out in the 70s, where we allegedly received a response in the form of a crop circle. Sheila Garcia, if you're listening out there, thank you very much for the analysis that you did. I did read that email, and if you tell me I could use your name with credit, I will absolutely do so. Here's a couple more before we bring on our all-star guest. Wave of UFO sightings in Finland inspires photographer. Now, how many times has that happened to many people? They're skeptics until they see something anomalous, and then their minds open up to possibilities, saying, well, wait a minute, we were taught physics work one way, but all of a sudden, why is this violating the laws of physics as I know them? Maybe what we're told is not necessarily true. This comes from my good friend Alejandro Rojas in Open Minds. Here's another one. Delaware motorist encounters hovering UFO. I don't know if there's a photo of that, but this is another person who his mind has been changed. Unfortunately, the person who sent me this one did not give me the source. Preferably, everyone out there, I always love to get your news, but a source is very much appreciated. And like I said, if you want your name, just say so. Here's another video to see. Triangular UFO caught on camera by California witness. Obviously, we know there's a lot more activity going on. Something's going on. But there's a lot of videos popping up. The problem is these newer videos, most of them, or at least half of them, are nothing but BS. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. We have so many top people out there showing why they're not real, especially these laboratories that Jaime Maussan works with. Here's another one. This is great because this actually involves the presidential run that everyone's been talking about. That's going to be in our heads and nothing but for the next year, at least a year. First week of November will be the elections. It says, ETs for Hillary, why UFO activists are excited about another Clinton presidency. As you all recall, if you recall, Lawrence Rockefeller had a picture taken of him with Hillary Clinton when she was holding a book on UFOs. And this was in the early to mid 90s during Bill Clinton's presidency. And of course, you all know about the Rockefeller Initiative. This was brought up by many people, including Dr. Stephen Greer and Stephen Bassett and several other researchers. Are we ever going to get that disclosure? I don't know. I think acknowledgement is the better word. Again, it's out for you guys to know. Now, that is the news for the day. If you haven't been teased enough with the guest, well, let me just tell you who it is. He really needs no introduction. Others name. Everybody knows exactly who this is. The one and only Lee Speigel. Mr. Speigel, welcome to the show.
Is Lee Speigel on tonight? Oh my God!
Yeah, that's right. That's what I heard too.
I better tune in.
Me too. Everybody tune in. Lee's on, and this is the journalist. If you plan on going into that world, or even if you just plan on reading anything, this is what you need to read because this person vets things more than anywhere else I've seen, and follows through with real evidence and talks to real witnesses and doesn't just throw in that baloney that so many other people do. Lee, you've been involved in journalism for 40 years. Why don't we give everybody out there some background on what led you to not necessarily become involved in ufology, but in journalism? What works have you done in the last 4 decades?
Well, you know what, Dr. J, before I even get into that, I just want to quickly mention one of the news items that you were just talking about. If it's the same one that I'm thinking of, that's got me a little pissed off, if I can say.
Of course.
the bizarre butterfly, okay? The bizarre butterfly UFO, it's been called the clearest alien craft ever caught on camera. Okay. Uh, this is one of the things that I hate about media, and I'm part of media, as are you. I hate when media doesn't get something right. Not only that, but when they actually go out of their way to perpetrate a hoax and to plagiarize other media colleagues. And that's what I believe is going on. And I've only just been made aware of this in the last couple of days. And I just want to make you and your audience aware of this. This whole story about the butterfly UFO, I first read about this literally this morning in the tabloid, the UK tabloid called The Express.
Yes.
And it was written, okay, the story, because I get these Google alerts every day, as maybe you do, and it's something that everybody should do. If everybody wants to be really up on exactly what news is all around the world, just go to Google and sign up. It's free. Get some Google alerts. Tell Google alert you want to know everything about UFOs, extraterrestrials, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, paranormal, whatever the topic is you're interested in. What will happen is at the end of every day, you'll get these Google alerts. You'll get a Google alert UFO. You'll click on it, and it'll give you every item that has appeared in the news today about UFOs. It's like, thank heavens for the internet. It's amazing. It saves a lot of legwork of doing investigation, and it gives all this stuff. So I was going through my Google alert and came up with, Express, bizarre butterfly UFO branded, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. The guy who wrote this story, his name is John Austin, okay, from the Express, because he's got the byline there. And part of his story, and I've got it up in front of my screen, he basically said that this video of the butterfly UFO was released by a YouTube channel that has been previously accused of posting clips with computer-generated imagery. Now, when I saw that, my first response to it was, well, Mr. Austin, who's writing this story, you've got a lot of nerve mentioning someone else who's been previously accused of doing something underhanded. And the reason I say that, Dr. J, is because earlier this week, I was part of an email thread from, in fact, Alejandro, who you and I both know.
Rojas, yes.
Rojas, who wanted to know, Alejandro wanted to know if I and if Leslie Kane, one of the best writers in the whole UFO world, if we had seen John Austin's earlier story on the Express, in which he apparently plagiarized Leslie Kane's most recent Huffington Post blog. Not only did he just refer to her as a spokesperson, she wasn't a spokesperson for this particular UFO story. She was the author of the story for the Huffington Post. And this guy, John Austin, I keep mentioning his name because shame on you, John, for doing this. He called this an exclusive story. In his headline, it was exclusive. There's nothing about that story that was exclusive to him or to the Express. And all of a sudden, like 2 days later, I see this new thing by him in the Express about this bizarre butterfly. Is he kidding? Yes. I mean, he's got a lot of nerve. He's got a lot of claim that the YouTube channel that put the butterfly UFO out there has been accused of blah, 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 when I'm here accusing him of doing something underhanded. And so just so that you know, Doctor, and your audience knows, this is one of those things that I'm talking to my editor about to see if he will let me do a piece on this, because this is not right. there's too much plagiarism going on. And I don't even mind saying this. A lot of this comes from the UK. The tabloids in the UK, several of them over the years have ripped me off. They will basically, some of them have taken some of my entire stories that I have written word for word, and instead of saying, credit to Lee Speigel, Huffington Post, the byline will be, instead of anybody's personal byline, it'll say byline written by, let's say, Daily Mail staff.
Yes.
Because the Daily Mail has been, we accuse them of this. And what happens is, what people don't realize is a whole chain of events happens where I get upset, I tell my editor, he tells his bosses, they contact our lawyers. The lawyers have to get in touch with the tabloids and basically say, cease and desist, take this down off of your site. You cannot do this.
Do you know what
There's
YouTube channel he was referring to?
I will tell you that in 1 second. As a matter of fact, it is called, it's one word, Secure Team 10. SECURETEAM and the number 10. There you go.
Yes, I've actually heard of that channel. I've never seen any of their videos, but like you said earlier, and as we talked off air, there is a lot of videos out there that it's actually worse for ufology the last 20 years than it was 30 years, 40 years prior to, because you couldn't Photoshop a picture from 1897. I remember seeing an amazing photograph. I mean, of course, it's black and white, very grainy, but it's clearly a disc-shaped object. I believe it was taken in Spain in either 1896, 1897. Lots of those exist prior to the 40s when people, let me see if I got this name, such as Rizpath, it's claimed that all this started in the 1940s, which is BS.
Yeah, he's totally wrong, and that will bring me to another point a little later. Is that he's typical of not just skeptics but hardcore debunkers who feel like they have a mission to not only just explain things away because this is part of what they do, but they don't seem to have a problem with the fact that a lot of their debunking is also a form of ridicule to really good people out there who aren't hoaxes and who aren't trying to pull everybody's legs. And people have had their lives ruined because of the policies of debunking that the United States government set up long ago. And for some reason, the debunkers say, well, we can do that too. It's like my friend Stan Friedman, the nuclear physicist.
Yes.
Okay.
Good friend, good guy.
In every one of his lectures, he always says the same thing, and I always love to quote him on this. He says the debunkers pretty much have their own mantra, and here's the mantra. Okay, I'm a debunker. Here's my mantra: don't bother me with the facts. My mind is already made up.
That's right. And of course, his famous 2 lectures: "Science was wrong" and "Flying saucers are real."
Yeah, there is so much crap out there, and as you and I have talked before, we're at the point now technologically where put a 10-year-old in front of a computer screen, give him basic Photoshop software, and he or she will create an amazingly realistic UFO picture or video of something coming out of the clouds, and people will believe this.
Yes.
And this is so bad for the subject because you've got people there, and a lot of these people are still living in their parents' basements. I don't mind saying that. And they want their 15 seconds of fame, not 15 minutes of fame. They only need 15 seconds of fame because in 15 seconds, you can put a UFO video out there. It can go viral and you're famous.
Exactly. There's a very famous one. I believe it's in the Dominican Republic. You see these palm trees blowing in the wind, and out comes, I think it's 2 or 3 very vivid flying saucers. And the time I saw this was a couple years ago, and it was well over 10 million views. Lord knows how many it has now, but it's been debunked over and over and over again, and yet people still watch it.
Because people want to believe in something. They want to believe in something that is outside of their normal daily lives. They want to believe that there is something out there, that whether it's, gods from outer space or other intelligences or something that will make us feel that we're not alone in the universe. Everybody wants to believe. There are two fundamental major questions that humans have. They always have, and it will always stay the same two fundamental questions. And they are we alone in the universe? There's question number one. Question number two is, what happens at the point of death? Is there life after death? Everybody wants to know that.
Though, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because those are the two questions that people always ask for, and the third one, the meaning of life. But they always want to know. That's why near-death experiences and experiencers are very popular. Anybody
Yeah,
who's in touch with the other side or other dimensions or whatever you want to call it are also very popular. And of course, anybody who's had some sort of interaction, usually people that have gone not just a close encounter of the first kind, but close encounters of the third kind or even the fourth kind, which are not, the people are unwilling, but nonetheless, there's so many cases of very credible people that you just can't deny. As a matter of fact, one that you are probably very familiar with is happened, I believe, in the early 90s, 94, if I'm not mistaken. Linda Corteil. And there was a lot of
mm,
witnesses from the Brooklyn Bridge that saw this. And she
yeah,
lived on the ninth floor in an apartment building in New York. And what happened was they saw this giant flying saucer and what looked like a human figure floating in the sky into
right.
the saucer, followed by 4 to 5 smaller beings. That is a case because you have what now, sadly, the UN Secretary General has not come forward, but who has talked about it? The two people in his car, the driver as well as the bodyguard, and not to mention all the other witnesses on the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah, exactly. And skeptics and debunkers will say, well, that's just hearsay. It's eyewitness testimony is not all that reliable. I used to say, but I don't say this anymore, that eyewitness testimony about UFOs should hold up in a court of law, because in regular court cases, eyewitnesses are an important part of how a case is solved one way or the other. But when it comes to UFOs, we've learned that eyewitnesses cannot always agree or maintain credibility. And so eyewitnesses in a court of law about UFOs, you can just throw it out. And I mean, really, even though there might have been many people who claim to have seen something, without tangible evidence, without a film, a video, a series of pictures, it's impossible to prove something like that. Now, I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but I am saying that it makes it much tougher for people to want to talk about it when there is no proof. The debunkers will say, well, the burden of proof is on the shoulders of the eyewitnesses or the people who claim it. I don't believe that. The burden of proof is on everybody.
That's right. That's right.
You can't just isolate the eyewitnesses and say, well, if they can't prove it, then it's not true. You cannot do that. This is a much bigger thing than anyone knows about. My friend John Alexander, Dr. John Alexander, former
Yeah,
Army,
Colonel. Yeah,
yeah, Army Colonel John Alexander, who many people in the UFO field think he's working for the government still, and they think he's a government debunker, and he's not. And he says to people, and they don't understand when he says this, is that basically when it comes to UFOs, people aren't asking the right questions. They're just outright believing what they want to believe, and they don't want to hear anything else, because this is a very complex thing that you and I are dealing with, that we talk to people about. It's much more complex than I thought it was when I first got into this 40 years ago. And I've changed my opinions about my feelings because I've spent 40 years talking to people who are in the know about this, and it's completely changed how I feel about this. And some of it is almost too much for me to handle. My head sometimes explodes when somebody tells me something that I haven't realized before. It's really it's amazing. It's bigger than we all think, Doctor. That's for sure.
Hey Lee, this is Tom. Hey, question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think the general public has been kind of, because of all the debunking and the constant questioning that what you just talked about to the same point, do you think the general public has been kind of immunized against acceptance? Do you think that's part of what's happened?
No, I think the public really wants strong answers. I think in just recent years, just I like to call this the little spacecraft that
Yeah,
could the
I
Kepler
guess
spacecraft because of the discoveries of exoplanets, Earth-like planets. It's making the public see that there is something possibly out there that means life, and we're not alone in the universe. I think it's
true.
growing.
True, but I guess my point is that it's still kind of this. If it isn't seen on television or they didn't hear it from the government, they don't know what they don't really. They're not. There's a larger audience that won't necessarily accept it. There's a growing audience that automatically says, "Yeah, of course, there's something going on out there. Of course, there's life out there." But then I see that there's kind of the what you might call the low information voter, the person who's not as in tune with a lot of these things. There's still kind of a skepticism. They didn't get permission to believe it yet. Do you see that?
Yeah. Okay. And you know what, Tom? Over the last couple of years, I've actually developed. I haven't got a copyright on this yet, but I put together a thing called the Lee Speigel UFO Credibility Factor Checklist. And what this is a series of questions that I've come up with that I will ask skeptics or debunkers about UFOs. And the gist of these questions is that if any debunker cannot answer the word yes to any of my questions, then as far as I'm concerned, they are ignorant of the facts and they have no business spouting their opinions about UFOs because they don't know what they're talking about. And all they have to do is answer yes to one of my questions. And I have found so far that a lot of people cannot answer yes. And so I think I've hit on something here. And it questions, a couple of questions, for example, one is ask a debunker, have you done any serious research or investigation or legwork into UFOs? You know,
Most of them say no.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. But
Okay.
yet their minds are made up. Don't bother me with the facts. It's all right there. All they have to do is look and read.
Yeah. I just say yes to one of my questions. I'm begging you, say yes to one of these questions. Here's another one. Have you ever spoken to commercial or private or military pilots who have had very close encounters with unexplained objects?
And the sad part is there's so many. Jim
Yes.
Durant is one that I'm in touch with fairly regularly, and you know the policy among the airline pilots is that
I know
they don't want to really talk because they don't want to lose their job. But
that's right.
Yet these are people that know what's in the sky. They know what objects to look for because they're piloting craft all the time. So obviously, when a pilot, especially a commercial pilot flying several passengers, a couple hundred at that, is in charge of all those lives. They put him through all these tests to get to that point. So when he sees something anomalous and reports it, we got to give a little more credibility to that person because of who they are.
And you know what? Also, there are skeptics, especially Jim Oberg, who I respect. Jim, he's basically Jim Oberg, former rocket scientist. Now he's a leading UFO debunker and skeptic, but he's been an open-minded skeptic for years. But Jim will be the first person to say to you that pilots make the worst kind of eyewitnesses. And part of that is based on the fact that when they're in the cockpit, even though the computers are running a lot of things, the pilots have a lot of things to be looking at, and they can just as easily misinterpret something in the sky as the non-pilot. And yet, when a pilot encounters something that he sees first on the left side of the aircraft, then he sees it go under his aircraft and come up on the right-hand side and suddenly pace them and then move off into the distance and then come back. Is that the planet Venus? I mean, really?
I know, right? Yeah, planet Venus is moving up and down around the craft. Yeah, that's my favorite one. And the swamp gas. What about
Swamp
that?
gas. Wow, the swamp gas. That was the phrase that was formed and coined by
Hynek.
by
Yeah.
my old friend, my real grandfather, J. Allen Hynek. Hynek had the worst job. He for over almost 20 years, he was like the stooge for the Air Force because whenever there was a big sighting or a UFO flap in the 1950s and 60s that the Air Force had to explain, they would always send Hynek to the scene, and he was instructed to make it go away. Come up with any explanation you can, debunk it, make it go away. And he hated that, but he did it. And he was the one who came up with swamp gas. And after the swamp gas thing in 1966, I believe, at the time, and this was in Michigan, Congressman Gerald Ford became really pissed about what Hynek said, and Ford demanded and got a congressional investigation into UFOs because of the swamp gas incident.
And that's the one where Stanton Friedman fortunately testified, and because he was the only one from the citizen hearing on disclosure 2 years ago that had Stanton Friedman, along with several other researchers, witnesses, and of course you were there covering it all 5 days, and 5 former members of Congress and one retired senator. But yes, he was the only person that testified in front of that, as well as the real congressional hearing in '68, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I believe so. And of course, hell, I gave him a shot. He was one of my speakers at the United Nations in 1978.
That is definitely something I want to get to. Real quick, I want to
Okay.
talk about Hynek for a second because
Okay.
I truly feel sorry for the guy. As you said, he was given these, stories and said, make them go away. And as you mentioned, he coined the term swamp gas in '66. But yet, after all was said and done, he became an advocate for disclosure and for believing in something going on. And I also heard rumors that he was kept out of the loop of some of the better cases.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. You have to remember, even presidents of the United States, if you don't have a specific need to know or a high enough security clearance, even if you're a president of the United States, you're not going to be informed about some of the stuff that's really happened. I think that in the last 40 or 50 years, maybe there have only been a handful of presidents who may have had that need to know. And I believe Dwight Eisenhower was one of them. And I believe Ronald Reagan was one of them.
Yes, that's right. That's absolutely right. And I think because they knew, and Eisenhower obviously allegedly was briefed, and Nixon was in that briefing, so he sort of caught the, what was known. And then there's that famous story about him and Jackie Gleason. But I also think George Herbert Walker Bush knew at least something for a couple of reasons. First of all, he was the director of the CIA, I think, right. 78, 79. And also, as you know, Grant Cameron, when he called in to speak to Dick Cheney on a radio show, when he asked him if he'd ever been briefed on the topic of UFOs, rather than just saying no, what better answer could you give for plausible deniability? If I had been briefed, it would have been classified and I wouldn't be talking about it now.
Yeah.
Why would you say that instead of just no?
I know. I know. Well, it's like Cheney was just speaking kind of the truth because I believe he was right. Of course, it would have been classified beyond the public's consumption of it. And maybe he just wanted to just get that out there. I mean, it's the same question that I would love to pose to Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta.
Yes.
But what is possessing him to put these little tweets out there where he's actually baiting his own boss to say something about UFOs, and he still has a job. I,
That's
I
right.
don't I don't get that at all.
That I'm hoping that it's happening because of the fact that maybe they're acclimating us towards a disclosure. First, as you mentioned earlier, the Kepler telescope constantly finding these exoplanets, constantly finding these Goldilocks planets. Earth's second cousin, I believe, was one of the stories from
Yeah,
a
yeah.
few weeks ago, and then another one of several months ago. Every single day, you're hearing more and more news where everybody who is 22 years or younger was born after the fact that another solar system was found with planets. Now, when I was in elementary school, our science teacher taught us, nope, we're the only planets
Right.
in the galaxy and in the universe, and we are lucky, and this is it. And this is still when, of course, Pluto was classified as a planet. Just in case for all you listeners, for those two of you who try to call in already, please yield your questions for the second hour. Same thing with Twitter. I will get to them. Now, let's go back to 1978. Was that, I'm assuming this was after your side, and you want to talk about that first?
The very first thing that I ever did in this crazy field, and I'm so proud of it, was in 1975 when I put together a documentary vinyl. Do any of you remember vinyl records?
Yes, yes, yes.
So I put together a documentary um, vinyl recording called UFOs: The Credibility Factor, and did this for CBS. And this was at a time in America when, and you don't really see that anymore now, but generally every night on primetime television, there were advertisements, little minor ads for recordings. You could get the best of the Mantovani strings if you call in now and use your credit card, and the best music of the 60s, and just call in now, and if you order right now, we'll give you a book about the great music and blah blah blah. But there had never been anything like for sale on primetime television about UFOs, and mine was the first, and it was one of the things that kind of helped it become a classic, um, because it was the first time that a major recording company like CBS even backed a UFO related product. It was the first time so many credible, respected voices were heard together. The first time a UFO product was sold on TV in a 2-minute commercial. That was unheard of. Um, and it was one of the few related products, UFO products, that were chosen by Dr. Hynek to be included in the 1976 edition in the famous Edmund Scientific Catalog, which was amazing to me because I used to buy products from Edmund Scientific. And the catalog people asked Dr. Hynek if he felt that there were enough products about UFOs, credible products, that they could start actually offering them to the public in their catalog. And Hynek chose a few books, some slides, and my record album. And I was astonished at that. And so I could see that the tide was kind of shifting from pure debunking and skepticism to groups of people. Many people don't even know that Dr. Hynek and astronomer Jacques Vallée came together, and they created something called the Invisible College, which was a kind of an invisible group of many scientists who were very interested in UFOs. And you don't hear much about that kind of stuff now. A lot of scientists won't come out and talk about UFOs because, for the same reason why airline pilots won't and military pilots won't, because there's this thing that's called, it's a career killer if they start talking about it. And of course they won't. Why would they?
The ridicule factor, and
Yeah.
we have it worse here in the United States of America than do many other nations. You go to Latin America and talk about I saw this in the sky, or I saw this crazy being making amongst my sheep. They're not going to laugh at you,
Right.
and it makes you beg the question, is it put in place by the United States government? Terry Hansen, prior to him passing away, gave a lecture not just about false flags, but about ridicule. And he tried to put a link of the National Enquirer, prior to that, not the National Enquirer, the Weekly World News. Remember that?
Oh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
You've just hit the nail on the button. That is my all-time favorite newspaper. I couldn't wait for every Monday to go to the supermarket and just to see what the cover picture was going to be.
That
Oh my
boy,
God.
yeah.
I actually got friendly with one of the editors and the writers at the Weekly World News because I caught them on a stupid story that they faked. Oh, like they didn't fake any stories.
I know, right?
And I got friendly with the guy on the phone, and he sent me a Bat Boy T-shirt.
It's funny. They actually sent me one too when I subscribed, because I had to subscribe because it was my comedy for the week, And there was not a single story in there that I didn't laugh about. But Terry Hansen talked about the fact that the CIA funneled 75 grand. I don't know if it was the 60s or the 70s to start that newspaper. That they could throw one story mixed in with 99 other BS stories to ridicule the entire topic.
Well, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Well, that kind of explains why I was drawn to the Weekly World News. I must have known, I must have somehow psychically known that there was something really good there.
Well, let's talk about your sighting before we jump into what happened in the UN.
Well, as I mentioned, in 1975, I was in the middle of putting together my UFO record album for CBS, and so I was traveling around the country and I was doing interviews with people. The first person I ever interviewed about anything, and the first scientist I interviewed for my album was Stan Friedman. The second scientist I interviewed was J. Allen Hynek. So I got a really good start with these two guys, and I got really friendly with Hynek, and he kind of became the paternal grandfather that I never knew. We were so close over a period of years, and so I'm working on my record album, and he calls me one day from the Center for UFO Studies that he had started at Northwestern University, and at the Center for UFO Studies, Alan had a special hotline set up that only law enforcement officials and officers and sheriff's departments all around the country, they could call this number and report strange things going on in their towns that they couldn't explain, so that Hynek would have a sense of what's going on around America with UFOs. So he called me and he said he was getting these calls from sheriff's people in Lumberton, North Carolina, and about maybe 20 miles south of Fayetteville. Fayetteville is the largest city from Lumberton. And he said that he didn't have anybody down there as an investigator. Did I have the time to go there and check out the sightings? And that if I came back with enough credible interviews that I did with the people and the sheriff's people and the police officers, he would publish my findings through the Center for UFO Studies. So I said to him, so Alan, what exactly are they reporting to you? What are they seeing? And what he told me disappointed me. He said, well, we're not really seeing many reports like this here in 1975, but they're seeing something that's triangular shaped or a boomerang shaped. And I said, you mean they're not reporting a classic flying saucer shape? Because I'd really rather see that. if you're making it, if you're making an appointment for me to go to North Carolina and maybe see the thing, can't you get me to see a flying saucer? and he said, look, if you don't want to go, and I said, no, don't finish that thought. I'm not going to piss you off. You're J. Allen Hynek. You're asking me to go do this? Of course I'm going. So
I wouldn't have turned it down. I mean, like you said, he's the grandfather of ufology, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I said to him, look, if you're going to send me to maybe see a flying Dorito, I'm going. It doesn't matter. And literally within a few hours of my arrival at the sheriff's department in Lumberton, the calls started coming in through the switchboard. People were seeing something in the sky they couldn't explain. Into a sheriff's car I went, and staying in touch with other police officers with their car radios. We kept in touch knowing where everybody was. We triangulated where we were all going. We finally emerged in front of this big field. The sun was already down. The stars were coming out. There was no moon. So it was dark. And the only sound that we could hear after everybody had turned off their car engines, the only sound we could hear were nervous animals in the vicinity, dogs barking, horses making nervous sounds, as if they knew there was something going on. And as we stood on one side of this big field, on the other side of the field was a line of trees. And we saw this alternating white light, red light, white light, red light, moving slowly from left to right above the trees. And then it stopped about midway over the trees, and then it started moving across the field toward where we were standing. So that was the first thing that kind of got my heart racing pretty fast, and it kept getting closer and closer and closer. And when it knew that it was directly above us, it stopped and it hovered, and it made no sound. It had no engine. And because of the lights that were situated on the bottom part of it, that's how we could tell it was a triangular shape, because the lights illuminated the shape of the triangle. There was a row of red lights up one side, white lights up the other side, and at the apex was a large bright light. Now, can your listeners actually go to your site
website
now
and see the
and
picture? Absolutely. Everybody, if you
Yeah.
can, there's a really fantastic illustration that Mr. Speigel was able to, I believe, have commissioned. All you have to do is go to drjradiolive.com, drjradiolive.com, and click on his picture where you'll see the extended bio, and then you will see this triangular shaped or a V-shaped craft with lights underneath. One of them in particular having a spotlight. And I believe before we went on air, Lee, you actually mentioned that the person pointing at it is you. And I see here there's, is it 3 police officers, you and 2 other people, total of 6 people in this drawing, right? Or painting.
Yeah, and it was just me and police officers. I'm the one in the center with both of my arms out, looking up at it, thinking, "Please don't eat me." I mean, because as this thing was hovering above us, all of a sudden this beam of light came down right to the ground where we were. And it was so bright. It was like a magnesium flare that they use at construction sites, that it's hard to look directly at it. It's so bright. And the whole event of the beam lasted maybe 2.5 seconds. It was that short. Then the beam went back up into the craft. All the lights turned off, and then the entire triangular craft turned an amber color, and it very slowly moved, turned about 45-degree angles in the sky above us, and slowly started to move away, as if it was saying, "I'm done with you guys. I'm going somewhere else."
And I bet that 2.5 seconds seemed like a lifetime, right?
Well, I was thinking, I remember thinking at the time how safe I felt, because I'm surrounded by these guys, and they probably get their 6-shooters. And then I went, wait a minute. Even with their guns, if they had guns, how safe are we really against a technology in 1975 that's doing stuff that we don't have? I didn't really feel totally safe until it left. And so we followed it as far as we could go, and we went from one little town to another. And in each town, we found police officers and other sheriff's people who had just had their own encounter. We came upon a police chief sitting in his car, and he said, "Yeah, I was just sitting in here, and all of a sudden, the whole inside of my car just lit up. And I looked out the window and looked straight up at it, and there was this thing parked in the sky above my car. And I said, "What did you do?" He said, "I got out of the car, I opened the trunk, and I pulled out my big official, law lantern that, they have these big flashlight things that they use in emergency situations." He said he picked it up, he turned it on, he aimed it up at the object, and he blinked.
Real quick, let me just tell you, you were getting a little choppy, but whatever you just did now, you sound perfectly clear. If we can keep it at that level, even better.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
The police chief held up his big flashlight, aimed it at the craft, blinked it once, and he said it blinked back at him.
So it responded back. So obviously it was not just a drone, it was something intelligent.
Yeah, so I said, "Well, then what did you do?" He said, "I blinked twice, and it blinked twice. And then it left."
Just like you said, as if it was done with you guys, right?
We found 2 other police officers in another county, and they said they heard that this thing was coming in their direction, and they get out of the car and they saw it coming toward them, and without it stopping its forward velocity, it made a quick 90-degree angle turn and went off in another direction. So, and just so that you know, Dr. J, it was years later when I actually had the chance to tell this entire story to Robert Schaefer.
Yes, famous skeptic who I had debate, good old Stanton Friedman last year or 2 years ago. Yeah,
and it was at the MUFON symposium of 4 years ago in Irvine, where you and I met last month.
Yes.
And but it was 4 years ago, and Robert was there, and he was floating around in the vendor's room, and I went up to him. We hadn't seen each other in years, and so I've always kind of liked the guy, and we shook hands, and I said, "Robert, what are you doing here? Why are you at a UFO convention?" And he said, "I can't be here." and you know what? As soon as he said that, I said, "You know what? I apologize. Of course you can be here. You have every right to be here. Please forgive me." So we went out of the vendor's room, and I said, "Robert, there's a story I want to tell you, but let's go find a quiet place to sit. And I want to tell you about an encounter that I had in 1975. I want to know what you think it was that I saw back then." So we found a place. We sat down. I told him the whole story that I just told you. And I said, "What was it, Robert? 1975. What did I see in the sky?" He said, "Well, if you haven't changed your story in all those years." And I said, "No, I haven't. It's the kind of thing you never forget. And I don't change the details or something like that." He said, "If it really did happen exactly as you said it did, the only thing that I can think of." So, Dr. J, are you sitting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here it comes. "The only thing that I can think of that you saw might have been a remote-controlled kite."
Yeah, in 1975.
In 1975, in rural North Carolina.
And not just any kite, one that responds to your signals. Right?
One that responds to your signals, one that knows where you're standing, so it knows where to aim the beam down, one that's making no sound. So whoever's controlling this remote, where the hell are they?
That's right. Miles away on the moon. What was his explanation for that? Yeah, I know. He's been on the show a few times. I had him once where the callers had a chance to basically talk to him. It's never been anything short of a shouting match. Even when Stanton Friedman and him had the famous debate. The next debate I scheduled him for is with Richard Dolan. We'll see how that pans out. But again, it always goes down to the same things as you said earlier, coming from our good old friend Stanton Friedman. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind is already made up. Now, I was hoping before we get to break, you tell me if it's going to take longer than that. Obviously, if it carries over, by all means. 3 years later, you had a chance to bring this to the world stage in the United Nations. And also, let me throw this in the mix. We know Steven Spielberg clearly has some interest in extraterrestrial life because of his famous movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then following through with that, he had E.T., the extraterrestrial, in the early 80s. And I heard he was even responsible with Michael Bay with the Transformers, which again involved an extraterrestrial, although robotic race, still ETs. Is there something he knows that we don't, but you had a chance to meet him?
Well, don't forget, he directed War of the Worlds
That's
also.
right. That's right. That's right.
So not exactly benevolent beings in that picture.
No, no, no. But
Just to give you the timeline on it, Close Encounters of the Third Kind was released as the big holiday movie for 1977. Okay.
mhm.
Um, the technical advisor on the movie was Dr. Hynek. And what many people don't know is Dr. Hynek is the man who came up with the phrase close encounters of the first, second, and third kinds.
That's right. And it was, I don't know who added the fourth kind, but then Greer added Dr. Greer, Stephen Greer added the fifth kind
Yeah,
of human initiated contact. But you're
right.
absolutely right. Yeah. He's the one that made those classifications.
So, Dr. Hynek was there on the movie set and was advising Spielberg on how to get it right. And in fact, in tribute to Dr. Hynek, at the end of the movie, when the mothership is coming down and it has landed, and people are starting to walk off the ship, people who had been abducted over many years prior to that, and they're walking down and they're coming back to Earth. There's a scene where Spielberg gets a shot of the group of scientists who are on the ground looking up at this amazing ship, and he focuses right in on Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
That's right. He had a cameo in that.
That's right.
I thought that was really awesome because, you have at the time, we call Stanton Friedman the godfather of ufology, but really you got to put it on J. Allen Hynek because when Stanton Friedman was a lot younger, he was J. Allen Hynek was his hero with
Oh, yeah, yeah. In fact, Newsweek magazine back in 1978 did this amazing article with a great picture of Hynek, and the headline was I think it was the Godfather of ufology, because he still is, years after his death, he's the most revered name in the whole system or community of UFOs. There's really, in terms of critical thinking, scientific thinking, years of really investigating and earning the total respect of even the military. Besides Alan Hynek, the next name is, of course, Jacques Vallée.
Yes.
Because the character of the French astronomer in the movie, who was the central character besides Richard Dreyfuss's character, Claude Lacombe, who was portrayed by French director Francois Truffaut, he was portraying the real life Jacques Vallée. And Spielberg has often mentioned that, and even Vallée has acknowledged that as humbly as he can. And so, of course, when I started wanting to put together something at the United Nations, I of course wanted Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée to be part of that. And I forget who called me first. I don't know if it was Alan or if it was Steven Spielberg's publicist, but the call came from Spielberg's office that he wanted to meet with me and Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée in his office in Hollywood, and they were flying us all out there to meet with him.
And you got to meet with two of the greatest minds in ufology. I mean, I couldn't even imagine how that meeting took place. I would have butterflies in my stomach on my way to it and pure excitement throughout the entire thing. And it would follow me for the rest of my life, just as you're bringing it up now 37 years later, I believe. It was 78 when you met them.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, it was like a few months after Close Encounters hit the theaters, and I was starting to make some headway at the United Nations, and Spielberg basically brought us out to his office, and the four of us sat there, and he wanted to know what could he and Columbia Pictures do to help us to move this further along at the United Nations, and so we were tossing ideas around, and he basically had Columbia Pictures provide me with a variety of materials that even he had used in his research of UFOs. And because one of the things that I was going to do at the United Nations was to put together an information packet that was going to be duplicated, and it was going to be distributed to every country in the world on the day that we did our final presentation. And so all the stuff that Spielberg and Columbia sent to me went into that packet. And there were pictures and diagrams and illustrations and a variety of things that they sent us. It was great.
Including testimony. And we're going to hear so much more about this. Everyone stay tuned. You're going to get some much more from the top journalist in this field and for in any field for that matter. My true hero, the one and only Lee Speigel. We'll be right back.
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
I'm Darlene Hooley, former Congresswoman, and you are listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
That is right. Welcome back to Hour 2 of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, that was Congresswoman Hooley, who was one of the 6 members of the citizen hearing on disclosure. Came in with an open mind as a skeptic, came out of the 5 days of testimony as a full believer. If you came into the show late, we are speaking to the one and only Lee Speigel, a very accomplished person in so many ways. He is the journalist I look up to. His methods and his hands-on research are really what everybody out there should be paying attention to and should follow. He's done so much by himself and has rubbed shoulders with some of the most important people in this world and with regards to ufology. Now, at this moment, I would love to turn it over to you, Mr. Speigel, to talk about where everyone can find you, where they could see your work, not just from the Huffington Post, but your previous work from the last 4 decades.
Well, an easy thing for folks to do, just go to my little website. It's simply leespeigel.com, and Speigel is spelled Speigel. Just leespeigel.com, and there are different sections, including the UFO album that I put together, the what I've done on NBC Radio, the United Nations, and what I've put on each of these pages is a lot of really interesting photos of things that happened at these various events to really help drive it home, so you can see what I'm talking about. Letters from people like the scientists and the military people that I've worked with over the years, and stuff that I'm just really proud of, and I'm actually in the back of my mind cooking up a scheme to maybe do something else with the United Nations. That's.
Let's also mention one other thing. Everyone's going to be able to have a chance to see you as well as me, and of course another member from the citizen hearing, Congressman Merrill Cook, at the International UFO Congress in February 2016. Everybody, all you have to do is go to IUFOC or just type in UFO Congress and you will go to that site. There are several awesome speakers there, and I will be on a panel. And as I mentioned, Congressman Cook will be giving his first presentation outside of what he heard from at this citizen hearing. He was on a panel with me back in Joshua Tree in May earlier this year, but this event will be quite different. I'm only going to be on a panel where he's going to be on a panel with me as well as speaking. So make sure you check that out. Lee, we have to get back to the UN stuff, but we do have 2 callers that have been waiting, so I would love to get to them real quick, and then we'll jump back to.
Let's do it. Let's talk to them.
Area code 717. Welcome to the show. And what's your name?
My name is Lou Sheehan, and Mr. Spiegel, or Lee, if I may, I have 3 points I'd like to make. They go.
Is your name?
The third one's an important question.
What's your name? Lou, did you say? Okay.
Yes. Last name is Sheehan. The first name's Lou. I want to start with a lighter comment and then segue to a challenge to you, Mr. Spiegel or Lee. And it's not a personal challenge. It's a substantive challenge to something you said. So just bear with me. First, I want to say I was a subscriber to the Weekly World News. I didn't just go to the grocery store. I actually paid to get it delivered to me.
Nice.
The second point actually is for Dr. J. It's not the Weekly World News, but it was the National Enquirer that had the CIA connection.
Gotcha.
The publisher, Gene Pope, was a CIA agent during the 1950s, and he was in psychological warfare unit. I'm getting that from Richard Dolan's book, if that matters to you, page 146, the second volume. And now, Lee, if I may, just bear with me.
Yeah.
This is not the place to argue, but I'd like you to prove something to me, a claim you made. So I'll try and articulate it as best I can.
Do it.
I personally, and I have no statutes to prove it, but I'd like you to provide them if you can. I do not believe that there's anything that is not a need to know for the president. Now, just let me finish before you cut in, if you would. I mean, the way I understand life is, if his CIA agent is, his or her CIA agent is not providing the information requested, the president replaces the head of the CIA, and puts people in there that he or she can get the information from. That's an example. But in the military, the black ops, I believe, my understanding is, there is nothing that can be withheld from the president. Now, unless there's an act of Congress, which I assume the president would veto, which could be overridden, or there is an act of Congress that was passed by law and the president signed saying there's some information to which I am not entitled. Mm-hmm. My point being for you, I think there are shibboleths out there that are not true. Now, if you get a statute or proof other than just someone making the bold statement, that's wonderful. You've proven me wrong, and kudos to you, and I will be the first to pass that information around. I don't think it's appropriate, but it could be true. But I'd like you to prove that. And let me give you a quick example. There's no such thing as evidentiary advantages to deathbed confessions. There's no such thing. What there is a dying declaration, and that is limited to, if Dr. J shoots me and I keel over and I say, it was Dr. J who killed me, that gets the exception to the hearsay rule. But in ufology, we're constantly being told that there's a deathbed confession, which gets, is given some great attribution, which is false. There's no such thing. And my point for you, and thank you for your patience for listening to my long soliloquy, is that I would like you to prove, because you're a smart guy, you're a responsible guy, to prove to us or to me that there is information to which the president is not entitled. Now, there may be employees who disregard their duty. They may not, the president may ask and they may say, I'm going to, internally, I'm going to lie to this son of a bitch. I'm going to be around for 20 years and he's going to be gone.
Lou, just watch the language.
Okay, sorry about that. But so you understand what I'm asking for. And you made the statement, so I'd like you to prove it, if you would. Okay?
Well,
could you send it to Dr. J? Go ahead. Your turn.
No, I was just going to say, I generally try to make a habit of not making statements that I can't personally back up. This is part of what I've done over the last 40 years. If it's a statement that I don't know about firsthand, but that I got it from someone high up enough who made the statement, and I feel I can quote that person, then I feel very comfortable in saying things like, I tend to believe that there are some things that some presidents are not privy to. And the reason that I say that, Lou, I didn't say that. Would you believe it if President Bill Clinton was the person who said that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, wait.
I'm on video.
Okay, no, wait.
Yeah.
I mean, I just wanted to hear you say yes. Okay, this
That's
is the
fair.
kind of thing. This is the kind of thing. When I put together my credibility checklist, I only want people to answer yes or no. So if you heard President Bill Clinton say that it's possible that there are some things that he wasn't privy to, would you at least take that at face value?
But that doesn't, to me, not being privy to is not being not allowed to get. That is to say, I don't interpret that sentence to answer my question. And that's not to be argumentative. When you say not privy to, maybe you're right. I'd have to look at it. I'm not trying to be argumentative. It may be a very fair question.
The way
you say that is pretty reasonable, Lee. So I'm not trying to say
well, then let me add something to that. The fact that Bill Clinton, I believe he said that it was after his second inauguration, then went right to the White House and asked staffers to look into and
Mhm.
get him information, correct information on what happened at Roswell and what was going on at Area 51. And
Mr.
and
Hubble.
what? Say again?
Yeah, Mr. Hubble. I saw that quote. Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Right, I'm saying that there is a video, and you can go find this video because I found it.
Right.
when I heard that Bill Clinton had made some statement in which he said that there was maybe some things that he as president may not be privy to, I wanted to hear what he said. And I found the video. Anybody can find it. I forget exactly how many years ago. It's easy to find on YouTube. You can go do a YouTube search. Bill Clinton was in the Far East. I forget which country he was in. He was on stage. He was sitting on stage alone, and he was answering questions by people in a big audience. And someone asked the question, what can you tell us about Roswell? And the crowd was giggling at that point, and some of them applauding. And Clinton started talking. And it was during that answer that he said that there may be some things that I'm not privy to as president. And that's all I'm saying.
I actually think that was from Germany, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but
no, maybe. I won't say exactly where because I don't remember, but I could find it again within 5 minutes if I had to.
Well, if you would, because if I can't, then I'll sit here and say, well, Lee, unfortunately passed the buck, and I can't. And I'm not doing a bad faith. I'm trying to click it in as I talk to you.
No. The
sure
thing is, Lou, you need to be fair here.
Okay.
I did not know that you were going to ask me this particular question. If I had known,
of course not.
Wait. Let me finish. Let me finish. If I had known that anybody was going to call to ask me something like that, I would have before the show. I would have put together a few minutes and I would have found the video. I would have given you the exact place to go. I would have sent it to Dr. J so he could put it up on the site and it would have been done. But I didn't have.
I agree.
All I'm saying is you don't have to believe me, but it is true. And I don't care if you believe me or not, but I'm not in the habit of making up statements like that without being able to back it up.
Let me throw in one other thing, guys.
And I'm just asking you to. All I'm doing is asking you to back it up. And if you're right, you're right. There's no way you would have known. I'm going to ask that question. I wasn't. That's what I was saying afterward. If you could follow up. Let
me say one thing. First of all, presidents are only in power for up to 8 years max. After that, they're not career politicians or career CIA operatives. So that's one thing. Second of all, as my close family member is actually in working for a private military contractor. This is just a suspicion of mine, but I think after the Freedom of Information Act was passed, I don't think we're being told everything, and the government no longer has to answer to us when the government has washed their hands of files, alien artifacts, bodies by giving them to private military contractors who are exactly that, private.
Could be. So, Lee, I wasn't attacking you personally, and my point is, if you could show me that, great.
Okay, well, I tell you, no, Lou, give me a moment here. This is exactly what I was talking about before when I mentioned that I have a checklist that I will give to skeptics, and I will say, if you are skeptical about something, then here are the things that you need to do, not me, because I've done it, but you personally, if you want to believe something or find out the truth about something, I can steer you in the right direction, but you have to do your own legwork. For you to say
with respect, I disagree with that. If you're going to make a claim, you have to prove it.
No, I don't.
Because I have no reason. I've never seen that video, Lee, and what I've seen is President Carter making a statement is that we asked around and nobody could. It's in James Fox's movie. His response wasn't there's information that's being kept from me. And I've not seen Bill Clinton. I've seen Bill Clinton make several statements, but not the one you're saying, and that's okay. But if you're going to make the claim, just like with Dr. J, I told him where my source is. It's page 146 of Dolan's book, the 7391, where he talks about the National Enquirer. I mean, I could just say that, but I'll give you, he has citations. It's Mr. Pope. So I know, I'm sorry, I disagree. But if that's where we'll leave it, that's where we'll leave it. I'll
I
look for that.
I don't understand. I don't understand. No, what you just said is perfect. That you will look for that because that means you will do a little bit of legwork, and it won't take you very long, Lou, to find it. And then when you find it, you'll go, "Oh, Clinton did say
I hope so. My only concern is,
it will happen.
I'm not being in bad faith. Yeah, okay, my concern is sometimes you don't put in the right search request, or I could find what you're thinking of, and it's not what you get the idea.
Lou, we will
I take your position.
We will absolutely find it
and
send it on the Twitter feed exactly, and it'll be posted up. We do have other callers, Lou, so I don't want to take up all the time because we do have to get into this.
Sure,
Lou, thanks again.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for your patience.
Sure, thank you.
All right, here's the other caller who has been eager. He tried to call in the first hour. Area code 360. Welcome to the show. What's your name?
Hey, Dr. J. It's Dan from Michigan. How you doing?
Dan, nice to hear from you. It's a pleasure to hear from you. You got any questions or comments for Lee Speigel?
Yeah, 2 quick comments. I'll keep it short. Getting back to the debunkers, and I've had a few spats online, and
okay,
they're not critical, knowledgeable, objective thinkers. I actually coined a term for them, and that's the rejectionists. And you could land, whatever on their doorstep, and they still wouldn't believe it. So
yeah,
you feel free to use that term if you'd like. The second comment is kind of what we dealt with and with the last callers, burden of proof, and I have to say, going through my journey, and you've seen something, I've seen something that leaves no doubt. And it being such an individual journey on putting something like this into your paradigm about the world, about the universe, that, sometimes people aren't going to get it. There's so much garbage out there, fallen demons or fallen angels and archons and all the stuff that swirls around. I mean, our belief systems are such a big wall to get over. That's just, kind of par for the course on this subject. And I just thought that kind of resonates with me, and I'm sure that resonates with a lot of other people out there.
And with me, I've always had a problem with the idea of fallen angels or the gods from outer space. That's never made sense to me because if we're dealing with any kind of sophisticated, technologically stronger civilization that's visiting Earth from somewhere, I don't know where, I don't care where, in biblical days, many tales from the Bible, from the scriptures, refer to strange vehicles coming out of the sky, landing, creatures coming out, intermingling with people. Oh, they must be the gods. Well, no. We cannot make that kind of assumption. But to the people in those times, they had nothing else to compare it to. And so, of course, they were looking at gods because how could they not be gods? And yet, now, when you talk about possible visits to Earth of another civilization, or even the fact that there might be other civilizations out there, the real cool question to ask them, if you have a chance to even talk to an extraterrestrial, is, do you have God in your culture? What
yes,
do you know?
Do you have religion? Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what are there people or other beings that you consider are gods to you? I mean, you can take it in many different directions. So there are no absolutes. I just don't like the idea of fallen angels because that just compartmentalizes it in like a little box and says, okay, it must be this, it can't be anything else.
Well, yeah, I don't think we've gotten the context right. We're seeing something, we're feeling something, we're experiencing something, but the context we don't have right. So I appreciate you coming on. And if
please, right. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you can give us a your craziest story if you have time at the end of the show. That would be awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Bye. Have a good night.
Dan, thank you for calling. And Lee, let me just say, I'm so glad you brought up the Bible, Old and New Testament. There are so many examples of what we would now call extraterrestrials, flesh and blood extraterrestrials. They were just using words that were available to them at the time. When you see, for instance, Alexander the Great in his memoirs, or people who talked about being on the battlefield with him, talked about flying shields. There's just so many references in our history. Even cave paintings, I know you've seen some of them. One that I recall, 37,000 years old, found in France, very, very primitive. And it shows essentially a bunch of animals, many of them extinct now. And what do you see in the sky? Several different types of flying saucers. There were so many, in fact, that the person or persons who found this cave painting had to catalog all the different types and sizes and shapes. And I just thought that was remarkable because it never stopped. From 37,000 years ago to the present, you always see a reference. Not too long ago, I think we reported on this last week on artbell.com, they found an article. I want to give Keith Rowland, the station owner, the credit for getting this article up. A medical journal, 1895, showed what appeared to be gray aliens putting someone on a bed. How many stories have we heard in the last 40 years plus, going back to Betty and Barney Hill, which is on 50 years old now at this point. Travis Walton's his 40th anniversary coming up next week. It's just out of control. We do have another caller, area code 719. Welcome to the show. What's your name?
Hi, this is Kevin in Colorado Springs.
Yes, right by the U.S. Air Force Academy.
I'm so glad he said that because I was going to bring that up. What's your first name again?
Kevin.
Kevin, you're breaking up a little bit, so if you can get a little more clear, by all means, ask away.
Oh, okay. How are you hearing me now? You hearing me any better?
I am, yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'm curious as to what you were going to bring up about the Air Force Academy, if that's what you were going to talk about.
Okay. I can very quickly tell you right now that one of the things that I wanted to do in 1978 in presenting my information packet to all the countries of the world, I wanted to present something really interesting, and during one of my trips to Chicago to spend time with Dr. Hynek, who was helping me to put things together for the United Nations, I was in his office and I said, Alan, all the years that you were in the Air Force, you had to have your hands on some filing cabinets, and I'm sure that you took some things. We need what I would consider a smoking gun document. Do you have anything in your files that we can give to the countries of the world that could be considered a smoking gun? And without missing a beat, he went over to one of his cabinets and he opened it up, pulled out a manila envelope, gave it to me, and he said, I don't know if you'd consider this a smoking gun, but if you want, you can use this at the United Nations. And I pull out this extensive chapter 33 of a book called Introductory Space Science. It was a non-published book that was given as part of a science course to the Air Force cadets at the Academy in Colorado Springs in 1960, like 67, 68. And this was a chapter simply titled Unidentified Flying Objects. And I'm starting to read this stuff and I'm going, holy whatever it was that I said at the time. Are you kidding me, Alan? Is this real? He said, yeah. I said, you don't know if this is a smoking gun document? This was a chapter in which the Air Force outlined in graphic details to the Academy cadets what the current thinking was by the Air Force. It was written by Air Force officers, and basically saying to the cadets, here's a brief history of the past 40,000 years of UFO sightings on this planet. Here are some of the more interesting of those sightings going back that way. how they correlate with things that people are seeing now. And the conclusion was all the things that we're talking about lead us to the unpleasant conclusion that Earth may be visited by alien beings and that there may be several different groups of them at different stages of development, and there is some evidence to support that. This is all from this chapter, and I'm reading this, and I said to Alan, can we really give this out to the United Nations? He said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And so I did. I printed up like a gazillion copies of this thing, and was always amazed. And whenever I give this to people, I'm amazed that this is what they were giving the cadets at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. And here you are, Kevin, calling us from there.
Yep.
Just amazing stuff.
And I might point out, too, that the Air Force never did deny, which they couldn't, but they never attempted to deny that this was given out to the cadets.
Right.
So, a couple things. The first thing, I want to try to answer Lou's question in a way that maybe makes a little bit of sense.
Okay.
A president may not have the need to know simply because of two words: plausible deniability.
Okay.
In the same way that Dick Cheney gave that answer in that committee hearing, so too I think Bill Clinton was answering that in exactly the same way. If I tell you that I don't have the need to know, then I have plausible deniability that I have the need to know.
Right.
It's kind of a double entendre there to an extent, but you get the idea. No, probably if a president demanded to know, he might be told, but there's always been the rumors of the presidents getting the talk.
The debriefing.
Yes, the debriefing, and including the unpublished slides of the JFK assassination kind of thing. This is what really happened. Do you really want to go there kind of thing?
Yeah, and you know what you're saying, Kevin, could be something from one of the upcoming new X-Files episodes. You know what I mean? It's like this is what the X-Files is all about, taking things that are in contemporary headlines involving UFOs and extraterrestrials and giving it a spin that may or may not be really part of the truth. The truth is out there kind of thing. Yeah, and it's the thing that Dr. John Alexander likes to say, like I said before, people are not asking the right questions. They're just believing or not believing basic things when it's a much more complex thing that we're talking about. So yeah, I know I completely agree with what you're saying here. Plausible deniability, yeah.
And the other thing that I would request of you and Dr. J, you talked about first encounter, close encounters of the first, second, third, and so on.
Yeah.
I'm kind of familiar with those up to the fourth, but past that, could you go into a little of what you're talking about when you talk about those? Because I get it all the way up to the third and fourth, but past that, I've never heard of the fifth kind or the sixth kind. And so I'd kind of like to get an idea of what you're talking about in regards to that.
Well, do you know what the first, second, and third kinds are?
Well, the first, I guess, would be that you sighted a UFO, and the second, I have a hard time putting it into the words, but the third would be where you actually have communication with an alien being, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just to kind of go from like first or maybe down to fifth. um, Dr. Heine created the category of these kinds of groups. And like an encounter of the first kind is when a person sees a UFO at close range, okay?
Right.
An encounter of the second kind is when a UFO sighting or report has something to do with leaving some kind of trace marking or scorch marks or physical evidence behind on the ground or landing impressions or something like that. That's the second kind. When it's an encounter that contains occupants of the craft seen inside the UFO, that's considered the third kind. Okay. Now we're getting more deeper into it. The fourth kind involves a person being actually taken, allegedly taken, inside an alien craft for whatever that experience is going to be. And then the final one that I'm familiar with, the fifth kind, involves what's considered some kind of direct communication between what they say are aliens and humans. Those are the basic. I don't know if there's a sixth. Dr. J, did you say that Steve Greer came up with a sixth one?
Yeah, a fifth one, CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, human-initiated contact.
Oh, okay. So I think we've covered them at that point,
Yeah.
Kevin. I mean, it's like, God, how many more can we do? Will it be a ninth or a 10th close encounter of the 10th
That's
kind?
right.
What does that mean?
Well, I think you could probably include something in there. You talked about communication between humans and aliens or humans with aliens, but maybe there ought to be a separate category for telepathic communication between the two species, because I hear a lot of supposed communication between the two species who are seeing one another, but they don't actually speak to one another. They communicate telepathically. And that, to me, is kind of like a whole nother ball game, because if someone can read your mind, an alien species especially, then you get into the category of higher civilization and technology and those kind of things, on top of just the fact that they're here visiting. I think you kind of understand what I mean by that. It's just another form of communication that, you can believe it or not.
Well, here's another thing to consider like that, Kevin. In that document that I mentioned about what they were telling the Air Force Academy cadets in 1968, part of what they was they approached the idea of why no contact between them and us. And the answer that they gave the cadets was, it could be, it's like when you go to a zoo, you don't try to contact the lizards. And that it's possible that an extraterrestrial civilization might think of us in that regard. When you walk past a large anthill, do you stop and want to say hello to the ants? Not necessarily. And someone who is more advanced than us technologically, possibly spiritually, may look or think on us as ants. See, again, we don't know. There's so much about this that we don't know. We have to come up with better questions.
Thank you, Kevin. We are running close on time. I definitely want to get Lee to ask his question. Finish his story, and we do have another written question, then by all means. So, Kevin, if you have one final thing, otherwise I have to let you go and get back.
Thank you very much, Dr. J, and thank you very much, Mr. Speigel.
All right,
Kevin. Great talking to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for calling in, and thank you for listening. All right, here is a question. This is coming from Nova Scotia, from Amanda. It says, Question: if you had, hold on, sorry, that got cut off because there was another caller trying to come in. Let me get back to it. Let's see if we can find it again. Here we go. Hold on, it was ready. When people try to call, if you had to convince me UFOs were real, what's the one piece of evidence you would want me to see or hear?
One piece of evidence?
Yes.
I would say this document that I was just talking about from the Air Force is very compelling to me. It just is on so many levels. I wish everybody could read this and start to form their own opinions about it. I would also, there's a thing about if you take 10 people and you line them all up in a row, and you go down the row and you ask each person, and these are people who may be skeptics, what would it take you to believe that Earth is being visited by someone? Or what would it take you to believe that the UFOs represent somebody else's spacecraft? You might get 10 different answers. See, that's part of the problem. You might get one person to say, well, I would like something to land on the White House lawn. I would like something to land at the United Nations. I would like the United Nations to make some kind of an international announcement. I think the president should make an announcement. I would like to have UFOs appear over every major city.
That's right.
I would like to have my own encounter. See, these are the kinds of things. Everybody has a different way of believing something. So for me, when I first saw this document that Alan Hynek gave me in 1978, it has stuck with me for a long time. This was the one of the most amazing things that I read, simply because it was prepared and written by Air Force officers. It was not published for the public, and it was basically giving the cadets an idea of, we're being confronted by something, we're not sure what it is, we're not just going to dismiss it, here are the possible things that it is, and we're left with a possibility that we're being visited by more than one group of extraterrestrials. Boom, there it is. That's one of the things that I believe helped to change my opinion about a lot of this stuff and a lot of the crap that's out there. And also, I would also suggest to people that they spend some time on an amazing website called the Black Vault.
Yes, John Greenwald's The Black Vault. He has more FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request documents from all the alphabet soup agencies than anybody else with regards to UFOs. Again, theblackvault.com. Very amazing site. The only thing that bothers me, Lee, about this so much is you have documents that literally show the date and maybe Central Intelligence Agency, and the rest is redacted, purely black. I mean, it's like, why even release such a page?
I know. Well, because it's easy to release something that, if you use the Freedom of Information Act, because you've got specific dates that you want to get documents on, all they have to do is take a big black magic marker and just get rid of all the stuff that we don't want to see, and then they're happy to release it to you. I mean, it's amazing. There'll be like an entire page, and all that you'll see on the page is the date, and everything else is black magic marker. It's laughable, and they get away with it, because they know that they can.
Absolutely. They can, and that's why they have been getting around this topic for so long. There was a person, I believe he's a professor now, I don't know who his name was. He appeared on the second, or should I say the first season of Ancient Aliens, because if you recall, first they had a one-off 2-hour documentary, then they had a 6-part series when they started their seasons, and now I believe they're in season 9, maybe season 10. But the episode called The Return, they were focusing on the Battle of Los Angeles from 1942. And there's that famous photo from the Los Angeles Times that shows this object with all these lights beaming on it. And he claims to have been witness to a craft being shot down and landing in the Santa Monica Ocean. Now, the cool thing is, or not, I don't want to say the cool thing, what he believes happened in Roswell 5 years later, to be exact, that why the military was so quick to crunch or quell the story, squash it, was because they have done this before. What do you think of that?
I wouldn't be at all surprised. Do you remember on the famous final speech of Dwight Eisenhower, as he was
Yes,
leading his
military-industrial complex.
he said pretty much to the public, be careful of and beware of the industrial military complex. And right there, it's all telling, because he knew, because he was a general. Just little blurbs like that are very telling about how things operate. It's if something is really, really big and could have the potential of making great changes on our planet, then you don't always want to tell everybody everything until you know as much about it as you can. And the other thing is, years ago when I was doing an interview with Nick Pope, who used to work at the
great
ministry,
guy, great guy.
at
MOD.
the ministry.
He was also known as the real life Fox Mulder from
I know.
the X-Files. Yeah.
So he, in one of the interviews that I did with him, he told me that the Ministry of Defense had a program that he was part of called Spin and Dirty Tricks. And I said, what does that mean? He said, it meant that whenever we had any kind of a UFO flap, a group of sightings, I was told, because I was a spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense, I was told to do whatever I could to not only to downplay these UFO sightings, but to actually ridicule the people who made the sightings. I said, how could you do that? Didn't you know that was not a good thing to do to honest people? He said, well, I felt really bad about it. And I said, but what was the underlying reason, Nick, for the Ministry of Defense issuing that kind of an order? And he said it was because no country, and he was only really talking about England, the powers that be, didn't want to let the public know and to admit that there were things operating in our skies that we had no control over. We couldn't chase them. We couldn't crash them. We couldn't catch up to them. We didn't want the public to think that we didn't have control of our own airspace. And there's a key thing right there.
Exactly, because we have sophisticated radar equipment and we are supposed to be extremely secure. How would people feel to know that these objects can fly in and out of our airspace without our permission, thousands of miles per hour, and then stop on a dime?
Exactly. We don't have anything that can touch them. Yes. And they know that. And they know that we know that. I mean, really, it's pretty basic. I mean, how many military organizations of all the countries of the world, how many of these organizations do you think would like to share information with their counterparts in other countries? Except for a few of the countries in South America, nobody wants to share stuff.
Yes, exactly. We do have, unfortunately, we're cutting it close on time. We have about 10 minutes, but I wanted to get back to what we started before the break, what you did for the UN in 1978, which is the world stage.
It is. And for me, it began in 1977 when I noticed that the Prime Minister of Grenada, Eric Gary, he began a crusade in the media to get the United Nations to pay attention to his idea to try and create an international committee to share and study UFOs. But nobody was taking him seriously. And he was in the news a lot, but nobody cared about what he had to say. So I came up with this idea. I got friendly with his ambassadors here in New York at the Grenada mission. And I gave a copy of my 1975 album, UFOs, The Credibility Factor. I gave the album to his ambassadors and said, please give this to your prime minister with my compliments. And I would love to meet him sometime because I think I can help him in his quest to get the United Nations to talk about UFOs. And a little bit of time went by, and I was invited to the UN on the night that Eric Gary was knighted, became Sir Eric Gary. Big ceremony, pomp and circumstance, lots of people, and it was on that night that we met for the first time. We had a private meeting after the ceremony, and he said that he enjoyed my album. What did I have to tell him? What kind of an idea that I have that could help him? And I said, well, Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, you've been making speeches at the UN to try and get your fellow nations to pay attention to you, but they're not. And yet, you know, the people who are on my album, I've got scientists, I have military people. I could bring these people together and put a presentation together that would knock everybody's socks off and get people talking about UFOs if you would sponsor my presentation. And over a handshake, Doctor, we made a deal that he was going to open up the Bank of Grenada and basically pay me for my time in 1978 to do the traveling that I had to do around the country, to line people up, to get all the materials I wanted to do, to bring people to New York. And basically, if your listeners go to your site again and go scroll down a little bit further on that page, they will see a preliminary meeting in July of 1978 that shows me with some of my cronies, scientific astronaut Gordon Cooper, Jacques Vallée. You know, this was the preliminary meeting where we sat with the Secretary General, Kurt Waldheim, where he wanted to know, what are you guys planning on doing here later this year when the General Assembly convenes again? And that's kind of how it all started. And I spent the rest of that year putting everything together, including that document that I told you about from the Air Force Academy. And we got some notoriety. My main speakers were Jacques Vallée, Alan Hynek, Stan Friedman, and Army Major Larry Coyne, who was the commander of a 4-man Army helicopter that almost collided with a UFO over Ohio in 1973. One of the most impressive sightings in history. And I had interviewed him for my album, and he wanted to come to the United Nations and tell his story. He said, but before I can come to New York to the UN, you're going to have to get clearance from my superior officers in the Army to get them to say, yes, I can come to New York and tell the story. So I called his commanding officer and said, here's what I'm doing at the United Nations. We'd like Major Coyne to be able to come there and tell his story. Do you guys have a problem with that? And the officers had said to me, no, we will let Coyne go there, but on one condition, that when he sits there and tells his story, he cannot do it in uniform. He has to wear a regular street business suit. And I said, that's it? That's the condition?
I wonder why. Yeah.
I'll buy him a suit myself. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
And they allowed it. They did not want to give the impression that he was officially representing the United States military in that capacity about UFOs.
That he wanted to be, they wanted him to be more of a civilian witness as opposed to representing the armed forces.
And when he told his story, you could have heard a pin drop in the Special Political Committee room because he read it from his own text, and it was like an amazing account. So I was amazed to be part of that, and to this day, even Jacques Vallée still refers to that whole thing that we did as a milestone event in ufology, and I'm just really proud to have been the guy who put it together. And I've seen things behind the scenes there, and I talked with people, heads of state, and so I got a good sense that there is a lot of interest at the UN, but there's nothing cohesive happening there that at least that they want to tell to the public. So I'm trying to find my way back in there and see if I can do something else there. So stay tuned.
Exactly. Everyone stay tuned and make sure you check out Lee's website. Lee, we're coming down to literally a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask you, since we definitely have to do this again, we can probably speak on this topic and so many others, not to mention you inspiring me, a young journalist, to follow in your footsteps. So therefore, we can go on weeks if we didn't sleep and didn't eat on end. So we absolutely have to go there. But I want to give you, before I give you, in a couple minutes, I'm going to ask you to give a final statement. I want to ask you if there's one story that sticks out in your head. I mean, there's so many. That'd be like asking me to pick my favorite child, even though I don't have any. What's your favorite? That's almost impossible to do. But for I don't remember which caller that it was. I don't know what it was. He was asking, what is your craziest story that you've ever encountered that I don't want to say could be validated, because a lot of them have difficulty, but is more credible than some of the stuff that we have seen online?
Well, I will tell you this, and it's not just because of my involvement, but that thing, whatever it was, in 1975 in North Carolina, I mean, I was already convinced that at that point that we were being visited by something from somewhere. But when you see something like that close up, and when you see it maneuvering and doing things in such a way that can't be explained by normal things, except for a remote controlled kite, you know that you're witness to something that's amazing. And I also realize that there have been millions of people who feel the same way about some of the things they've seen. And one of my favorite stories, probably, it's part of the Phoenix Lights that took place in 1997. So many people, there were different kinds of encounters, not just the things that looked like flares hanging over Phoenix, but there was a sideshow that was happening that involved many people seeing a gigantic delta-shaped or boomerang-shaped craft slowly coming over their neighborhoods. It was so big that as it slowly, silently moved above them, the shape of it blocked out the stars above, okay? One of those eyewitnesses who kept quiet for 10 years and didn't let people know he was one of the eyewitnesses was Arizona Governor Farmington.
Yes, who finally came forward 10 years after the fact, after making a mockery. Lee, it's been an honest pleasure. Like I said, we have to do this again. I want to give you this time to give a final statement to all the listeners. Please hang by till after the show, but give a statement to all the listeners, whatever you want to say. And again, let's plug in your website where they could see your work.
Okay. If you want to see some of the things that I've been up to over the last 40 years, making me seem like an old guy, go check out leespiegel.com. And if you're interested in seeing the stories that I've been writing literally over the last 5 years, the easiest way to find those stories is just do an easy Google search of Huffington Post, Lee Speigel. And it'll take you right to my page that archives all of my stories, and you'll see all of the amazing things that I've been writing about, including something that's happening tomorrow night in St. Louis. I've written 2 stories about this, and nothing to do with UFOs, but there's going to be the first time a live exorcism will be broadcast on TV at the original house on which the movie The Exorcist was based on, and this was in St. Louis, happening tomorrow night. You can read about that.
That is definitely something everybody has to check out. I have a deep fascination with exorcism. Again, I want to thank our guest, Lee Speigel, for joining us. It's been an awesome show. I definitely want to thank the station owner, Keith Rowland, for operating such a cool network. Stay tuned for Art Bell with Neil deGrasse Tyson, followed by Richard Hoagland with a cool guest after that. Again, disclosure is in your hands, everybody. Don't forget that. It is up to you. Be proactive. We need your help. Also, don't forget to check out the website, drjradiolive.com, and the YouTube channel where you see amazing UFO footage and where these shows are archived. Not to mention the recent shows plus 250 older shows that will all be there on one YouTube page. Again, it's drjradiolive.com. Tuesday, join us for Dr. Stephen Greer. Next Thursday, Jack Osborne is making a return, and then after that, we will have the one and only Linda Moulton Howe, followed by John Lear. Again, you could follow all this on drjradiolive.com. And again, like I said, the YouTube channel, you also heard so many other celebrities and politicians. They're all to be there. And don't forget our YouTube exclusive videos, the interviews that don't quite make it to this network because of time issues, sound issues, and sometimes they're too short. But again, people like Story Musgrave, who flew the Challenger mission, the pilot of the Challenger space shuttle, and so many other things. Edgar Mitchell talking about consciousness, Congresswoman Hooley, who you heard at break. All these are exclusive to YouTube. Again, DRJ Radio Live, again, Dr. J Radio Live. With that being said, thanks again to the one and only Lee Speigel. I'm Dr. J, signing